going to get started on the first part of our event tonight. I'm PJ Gaynard. I'm the city producer for the 48-Hour Film Project. Thank you so much for coming. This is the workshop portion of our event. WQED is co-sponsoring this event with us, along with Red Cayman Media, right?
Either way.
Yeah, Red Cayman Studios, and of course with Sunken Bus Studios. And one thing that WQED said at the outset is, boy, we would really like to be able to give a workshop so that we could grow our understanding of different aspects of film and video as something that they tacked on to the front of the Crew Connect event. So you're here for the workshop portion, and thank you so much for doing that. I'd just like to take a moment and go down the line and introduce each one of our guests and then begin a roundtable discussion about some things that have to do with composing music for film and then doing post-production audio for film so that we could learn a little bit. And then there'll be a chance for a question and answer session along with that. So let me just sit down here and go down the line. So not in normal order, but in A order. I'll start off with Shawn Jackson. Shawn, if you want to raise your hand. This is Shawn Jackson. Shawn Jackson is a noise stylist and chief engineer at Red Cayman Studios with 30 years of experience. This year, 30 years. So pretty great.
Yeah. Why not? I mean, when you have an
Two Jessies left, or two Shawns left is Jesse Naus. Jesse Naus is the owner of Red Cayman Studios and a chief engineer with over 20 years of experience. Please give it up for Jesse. And to my immediate left is Nathaniel Blume, a professional composer currently working in the film and video industry. Nathaniel Blume was the composer for Prodigal Son on Fox, working alongside Chris Fedak and Sam Sclaver to craft a unique score by sampling surgical instruments and medical instruments. He's also the co-composer for The Flash on CW, Arrow on CW, Deception on ABC, and also contributed additional music to blockbuster feature films Venom, The Last Dance at Sony, Supergirl at CBS, and Resurrection at ABC. Please give it up for Nathaniel Blume. And that's not all. I mean, there's a longer list too. But you know, my first question is for you, Nathaniel. How did you go from just starting out and composing the first thing? What was that? And then how did you get to where you are now? How did that happen?
Thank you, PJ. I don't know how much time we have for the whole track, but to give you a little bit of context for my origin story, I grew up in Indiana to a non-musical family. I don't have family history in that arena. I am the weird one who got out of Fort Wayne to pursue a career in music. I did my undergraduate studies at Butler University in Indianapolis, and then I actually ended up here at Carnegie Mellon University for my master's degree. And it was there that I started to meet student filmmakers, and not part of my curriculum. I was still working on my master's, but on the side, I was meeting these filmmakers and doing their short films, and one feature-length film at the time. And just getting my practice that way. It wasn't until a couple years after that I applied to the program at USC, University of Southern California, that has a 1-year, very intense study where when I was there, it was just a professional certificate. Now it's actually a master's degree that you get in 1 year. So you can imagine all the stuff you have to do during that year. Not including, if you want to work on student films, that's not stuff you get credit for. You have to go meet the filmmakers, pitch yourself, just like you would if you were out in the industry. So I did that as well while I was there. And I kind of lucked out because one of my professors at USC was looking for an assistant when I graduated. And I like to say that I was not his first choice. He actually hired one of my classmates, and it didn't work out after about 2 weeks. And I caught word of this and immediately was on email saying, hey, you know, I heard things didn't work out. I'd still really like to work with you. I think we'd be a good fit. And sure enough, I got the job, and that set the course for really where I am now. The composer's name is Blake Neely, and he usually has 6 or 7 TV shows that he's working on at any given point in time. So he was one of the most perfect people to come up under and watch him work and learn from him. I started out just as his assistant, doing the coffee runs, answering phones, teching the studio whenever something stopped working. I had to figure it out. And eventually, little by little, I'd get creative work, starting out orchestrating. Then I was doing some additional music. And eventually, my name started going on some shows, and I was able to get some of my own shows. I suppose that's maybe the gist of the story, but just to also put this in context, so I lived in Los Angeles for about 13 years, and the pandemic hit. My wife was born and raised here in Pittsburgh, and we have family here, and I also have 2 small kids, so we decided to make the move here. It was just going to be temporary at first, but after a year, we realized I could still be doing what I'm doing out there, but from here, Zoom is such a standard now for meetings and spotting sessions and things like that. Even people who are living in Los Angeles are jumping on Zoom sessions. So I fly out to Los Angeles a few times a year when I need to, but most of the time I'm just here doing my thing.
So how does it work? Like, what is your team like? When you get the job, like, do they like hum something to you? Do they give you parts of the movie that they say they want music for? How does it work? And then tell me about your process.
Let's start at the very beginning. I will say that as a composer, and I think I can speak for most composers when I say we would love to be brought in at the script stage and start spitballing ideas then and be a part of the creative process. I like to do something where if I'm able to read the script and get some ideas from the filmmaker, I want to write some music before seeing any footage, just to set up a language that we can start with. And it could be, I hate everything you just did. And that tells me just as much as if it was nailed the first time. And it's just a dialogue. It's a starting thing. Maybe even it's just, I really like how this part is mostly piano. I think that's a great sound. That's going to work. Something as little as that could be a seed that helps the process. But after that, then when the movie's actually in post, there's the spotting session, which, if you're not familiar with that, is when the composer sits down with the director or producers. If you have a music editor, the music editor would, of course, be there. Maybe even the editor of the project. and you watch it down. You decide where's music going to start, where's it going to stop, and what's it going to be doing in the meantime. And that's also a great time to start coming up with ideas and saying, what if we did this? What if we were in this character's head? Things like that. And then, as you mentioned, the team, then there's a musical team involved as well. Sometimes it might be an assistant of mine who's helping me with some technical details. If we have a budget to record, then the music team gets really big. At that point, you've got an orchestrator, musicians, mixers, engineers, and usually it's on the composer to handle and manage that aspect.
So you're sort of running that whole team at that point.
Right. And this will be a good time to mention too, there's a couple different ways that composers can be paid, and that would be a creative fee where you set aside a certain amount of money that's going to go to the composer, and they keep that just for writing the music. And if there's recording involved, then that comes from a different pot of money that the filmmakers manage at that point. Another way, which is more and more common, definitely in TV, but also in smaller budget films, is what's called a package fee. And that might be where you say, I've got this much money to spend on the score, and you hand that chunk of money over to the composer, who's then in charge of budgeting that money accordingly. And you have a discussion about what you want, and the composer can kind of say, well, yeah, I think you've got enough to do that. We could have a 3-hour recording session to get that done, so on and so forth. Just a couple different ways how that payment works there.
That's awesome. All right, I want to take a second to bring in Shawn and Jesse, because I don't want to neglect you, but also I want to give you, because I want to hear your stories about how you guys got to where you are now, and then how you interact and work with composers, among the other things that you do. So first of all, you're both chief high-level engineers, but that's not all you are. You're a lot of things. Tell us how you started and how you got to where you are now.
Sure. I started out as a horrible musician, and realized my dreams of being a rock star weren't going to happen. I got into live sound first because I was in a band. I knew people in bands, and that's where I began. And then I moved into music recording. I decided I actually wanted to not go to college for mechanical engineering and decided to go for audio engineering. I went to a small program in Ohio at the recording workshop. It's like 8 weeks. Did that. Decided from there I needed a little more. I went to Full Sail. Got out of that. Worked in Florida because, Orlando at that time was trying to be like the Hollywood of the East, which everybody calls themselves. But at that time, I worked at Universal, where they actually were shooting things at that time. There were studios where Harry Potter World is now that did all the Nickelodeon game shows from that period of time. So I was an assistant, kind of started out as an intern and worked as an assistant there, and then decided that I wanted to move back up north because I couldn't stand the weather there. Missed the cold and snow, and came to Pittsburgh for a short period of time working in advertising because I knew some people that were doing that at the time. Didn't plan on staying here, but ended up that I'm still here. So I started out mostly in a lot of advertising at that point, and doing sound design, mixing for broadcast, stuff, working for marketing, large corporations, doing those types of video. I also do video production, so I work on set not only as an audio person, but also I've been a grip, a gaff. I can run camera. Pretty much at one point they asked me like on a business card what they wanted my nickname to be. I just said Slash because it kind of fill in whatever. But my main concentration has always been audio. And then I started out kind of working on films. Since QED's here, I did a lot of Rick Seaback documentaries. back when Rick was doing both local and national stuff. You're probably familiar with a lot of those if you watch QED. And then I started moving into like more narrative type films, a lot of shorts, a lot of student films, things like that. And then I've worked my way up to pretty much working on a lot of the movies that are made here in town. Also doing parts of some of the larger Hollywood films that come through. I do a lot of ADR while the actors are here in town, things like that. Sometimes it's, doing voiceovers for it or, helping with, a small part of the film that they need something else done for. Probably one of the best things I think for me in that world was I recorded a young kid singing the national anthem, and it ended up being the entire first trailer for Batman. So yeah, I got kind of lucky there that they hired a local kid to do that. But things like that. A lot of times when movies come through town or television comes through town, they need certain people for certain projects. So I do a lot of that work. Most recently, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the film Unsinkable that recently came out. I did all the audio post on that film. Due to the fact that it took 6 years to get it done. At the beginning of it, we had planned on having an entire team for the audio, but that didn't work out due to a lot of circumstances called the pandemic. So that's pretty much where I am now, working here, doing a lot of that different stuff. So,
Jesse?
No one wants to hear from me. No, so my background's similar to Shawn's. I started as a musician. I was an okay player. I loved doing it, but like probably a lot of you who are musicians in here, I loved playing, but I hated practicing. So I just realized that's not really what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. Got really into audio. I was lucky enough when I was 14 to very randomly meet the guy who became kind of my mentor, who brought me up through the industry. I would love to say it was some sophisticated plan I had, but it was not. I just had some connections with this guy, and he very randomly took me under his wing. His name was Frank Rodriguez, and his background was he was a very, very established engineer in New York in the 70s and the 80s and early 90s, which was kind of the heyday of our industry. And he moved to Pittsburgh to teach, and he kind of took me under his wing. My background at that time, though, was all I wanted to record and produce music. Really didn't have much interest in film or post world. Ended up going and doing my undergrad at Duquesne, and mainly because he was the teacher at Duquesne. So worked with him for 4 years there. When I graduated, my plan was to head to New York, like I think a lot of people plan in that industry. And an opportunity came up with those guys to actually build a new studio downtown. We used to be on Fifth Avenue. Built a studio with those guys. They ended up deciding to leave the business about a year and a half, 2 years later. I again went, okay, I'm headed to New York. And then I realized we had these brand new studios, and why wouldn't I give it a run? So probably very stupidly, at 23, I signed a $200,000 lease on a studio, which, looking back at that now, was a really stupid idea. But I kind of jumped into the deep end because, all of a sudden I was in charge, which was too early to be doing that. But ran that as a music studio for a long time. Ended up, because of my engineering and my music, getting onto a couple of films and TV shows, doing music recording for the on-camera bands and some of the score work and everything like that, because I was an engineer, but I also could fully read a score and things like that. Got on a few shows like that. I'm trying to think. One of the early ones that we did down there was when Outsiders shot. We did a lot of the music for that. Ended up meeting Shawn just because he was kind of the top post guy in town, and I'm not going to say I was the top music guy because that's not true, but I was making a name doing music. And we became friends. And then we became very close when, this is super embarrassing to admit, but I got a call from Warner to do ADR on a TV show. And this was right during COVID, and we were broke. And I said, yeah, I'll do ADR on your TV show. That's great. You're going to pay me a lot of money? Like, of course I'll do ADR on your TV show. And we went through all of the COVID review, and we got approved, and we got SAG-AFTRA approved. And then at some point, and I'm sorry this is on film, but I said, oh shit, how do you do ADR? And I very quickly called Shawn, and I went, hey man, so I've got an ADR session in 2 days. Yeah, how do we do this? And he was gracious enough to really kind of show me the ropes and make sure it went well. And I think both of us realized we have a really similar view that it's kind of, unfortunately, an old school view where it's about doing good work and keeping the work here. And, you know, it's not just about getting the work for, you know, that was an ADR session that if I hadn't gotten it, Shawn would have probably gotten it. And he could have easily said, I'm not going to help you. Why would I help you? Like, I'll take the work. But he and I both always believed, and I think this comes from our mentors and how we came up, it's more important that when Warner Brothers is coming to Pittsburgh, whoever is doing the work is going to do it well and do it right to make the market here and the scene here look good. So I feel like that was kind of when you and I we went from friends to like, okay, we really have the same views on how this industry works. And then got more and more into film, more and more into TV. There was probably a good 3 or 4 year period there where if there was ADR being done in the city, it was one of the two of us doing it. And we would often call each other and say, hey man, I just got called for this ADR on this thing. I'm not sure if I can do it. And Shawn would say, yeah, they called me too, I'm booked too. So they would always book both of us. And we worked more and more together. And then we started talking about doing something together. My studio was still downtown, about, 4 blocks away from where you were? 5. 4 or 5. And then the opportunity, this building that we're in right now, and she's going to be very mad at me, but if we could all give a shout out and an applause to Steph, who's back there. Steph is the person nice enough to let us be in this space. So 2 colleagues of ours actually owned this building for about 18 years, and they built the studio that's on the other side of that wall that you'll see a little later. They decided to sell, and very randomly, through a lot of long drawn-out conversations that I'm not going to go into, the guy that was buying the building.
Some weird connections.
Yeah, weird
how
connections.
We ended up knowing that guy.
But the guy buying the building, so the guys selling it called me and said, hey, this guy's going to buy the building, and he doesn't want the studios. And they knew I wanted to get out of my space. So I said, can I get in a meeting with this guy? And long story short, it turns out the gentleman that bought the building was working on a film with the director and the producer who were working on a film with Shawn. And the day before the meeting, I randomly called Shawn saying, hey man, I might have a lead on this. I think it's a 1 in 100 chance, but I might have a lead. Blah, 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 blah. Shawn starts talking about this in a session with these guys. They got on the phone with the guy buying the building and they said, yeah, these are good people. You should make this happen. And we got a long-term lease on the studios. And I called Shawn and said, do you want to go in and team up? And that was kind of the start of this. And we've been out here just under 2 years now. And right now we probably split about, 40% music, 40% film, and 20% other. So, yeah, that's pretty much our story.
Wow. All right. So I just want to talk a little bit back and forth and then open it up and start with questions. The thing I'll tell you is that these guys aren't going anywhere. So I wanted this to be like a discussion, and then these guys are going to be in the studio over there, so there's going to be an opportunity to sit down and just talk with them directly for all of you. But how do you work with composers, and how do you work with folks like these two here? How does the collaboration happen, and what is that like?
A lot of times for me, depending on the project I'm working on, I'm part of the discussion of who the composer should be. Just because I not only work as a sound designer and mixer, a lot of the films I work on don't have the ability to hire a whole full team of audio people, so I end up also being the sound supervisor, and typically I'm part of that discussion. So I may recommend composers to them, depending on their budget and the size of the project. They might need 2 composers. It just depends. So that's kind of where we start the process, and then it's talking to the composer. It's seeing what their work is. Can they, handle what's happening on this film? We look at their demos, that sort of thing, and then, we make that decision. And then usually after that, I have a lot of back and forth with the composer. It's a lot of, what are you doing in these sections? I'm a lot of times in that spotting session. We typically, if I'm there, we not only turn it into the music spotting, but that's also where I talk about sound design as well. Because that's another part of what I do, is I have to work with the composer on the sound design, not interfering with what he's doing, but working with it and that back and forth. We also discuss a lot of how I want the stems from him and how that mix is going to be done that comes to me, and having that ability to tweak it if need be.
Yeah, that's so important, right? That you're working with each other and not competing.
Right.
And I've definitely had folks who aren't, where the composer and the sound designer aren't talking well, and they're like, well, I put a big bass boost right there, and the composer's like, I have this big crescendo right there, and somebody's got to sort of decide okay, you win,
Yeah.
Well, the beauty is I'm the mixer a lot of times, so I am the one making those decisions as well. But it's a lot of back and forth. It's a lot of communication, and then there's this communication, but then we also get the director or the producer or whoever's calling the shots on the final involved, and then we start having to make those corrections as well. So
I think the other thing to remember too is, obviously we're all dealing with audio, so it's kind of one big family. But we are also the ones coming at the end most of the project. Now, we would like to be involved.
earlier.
Everybody in here, we would like to be involved much earlier in the project. No, a lot of times, by the time we're really able to do our work, Shawn and I in post really don't want to touch a project until it's got lock. We want to talk about it. We want to make sure it's being done right and everything's being set up right. But in an ideal world, we're not touching the dialogue edit until we get lock.
I don't know if I've ever worked on anything.
Okay, there's what happens and
that
there's
had
what
lock
should
when
happen.
I started.
But for all of us, we're on the same team that the show or the movie or whatever, it's gone through the first 90% of its work by the time it gets to us, and we're the ones that are facing that last push at the end to go, everybody else is done. And obviously you're going to start composing hopefully before it's locked, but we kind of are that last thing that's get this done. For Nathaniel, on a feature, there's what should happen, but how realistically, how much time are you usually given from when you have something to start scoring till when you have to deliver stems?
Always much less than I would like.
It's a shockingly small amount of time.
Very small. The last feature I did, it was 3 weeks to do a 60-minute score, and that's rough. It's rough. Not ideal, but that can be done. Ideally, it's twice that. Or if it is possible, like I said, to get in on the script stage, and a lot of those creative ideas are worked out, that's what takes the most amount of time. It's just finding the sound of the project. Once you have that, a lot of stuff can move quicker. But and I would like to say too, it varies project to project what the sound situation is while I'm writing. Usually it's temp sound effects, so I only have the very obvious things to go on, like a gunshot, door slamming, things like that. But that's not the final sound effects. So sometimes I can have written a cue, and by the time the sound effects are done, we have something that's just not working. Sometimes there are magicians that just fix it, and that's great for me. But sometimes it comes back to me, and we have to work together to figure something out. Stemming was mentioned. I don't know how many people are familiar with that, but when I deliver the music, it's not just one stereo file of the mix. I usually do at least 6 stereo stems. Everything's split out. The pianos and keyboards are together, the strings are together, so on and so forth, so that there is some play.
Brass.
Oh yeah. Brass and dialogue, they do not like each other. I have come to learn that over the years. And I'm a trumpet player too, so.
I think that's why it's so important that the person who's mixing the film has a background in music, because when they're given those stems and they really have the opportunity to go in there and start monkeying with the music, like exactly what music you're hearing.
Yeah, I try not to change too much if I can, other than the overall level. But you do run into those circumstances where you need to do it because you have to adjust for the dialogue, which is the most important thing in a film, really, when it comes to the audio. So it's that. It just gives me the ability if I need to. It's not as if I'm going to go in and totally redo it. It's more along the lines of just when I need to, if I have a stereo only mix or even a 5.1 of the music, it doesn't give me enough. The thing for me is I don't want to just turn the music down wholly. I'd much rather just turn an instrument or one of the stems down and keep the rest of the music at a nice level. So it gives me the ability to do that, which I've always explained to composers when it's like, I'm not going to change your mix. I'm just going to adjust it so I can actually keep the level of the music in a better place.
Thank you
I'll
very
change it.
much.
I have no problem changing it at all.
Yeah, I can tell.
But I think it's also important to remember that on a bigger team too, and on these 3-week turns, you're going to have a big team because it's just too much work. Until that actual mix session, the final re-recording mix, the SFX team is independent. The dialogue edit team is independent. The ambience team is independent. The music team is independent.
Wow, would I love to work on that capital project? Yeah.
But even if you get into a team, even when we work, I'll give another shout out to Ben and Greta in the back of the room, who are 2 of our other engineers. You can clap for them, it's cool. But one of the reasons that we can get as much done as we get done as quickly as we can is because we divide it up and someone's working on something and someone's working on the other. So, the score might be perfect, the sound effects might be, and the sound design might be perfect, and the dialogue might be perfect. But for the first time when they all come together, through no fault of anybody, it just doesn't work. And that's when it really is about that communication between, that team. They need to be able to go okay, what has to go, what has to be reworked. And it's not a slight on any of those individual branches. They didn't know. It's not a linear thing, so.
It's interesting you mentioned that. Just to touch on the 48, right? Because that's my thing, right? And some of the people in this room are going to do the 48-hour film project. Some of you might not, but some recommendations that I always have for filmmakers when they're working with a composer for the 48-hour film project, because everything is so sped up. It's like they're writing Friday night, and I think you're absolutely right. You better have your composer on speed dial, because if you get musical, they need to drive to the writing session. They need to be there. And they better bring something to record music, or maybe you're going to their house, but you better be ready. But I always recommend that composers get that script Friday night and they write themes immediately. But before that, before even the weekend of the 48, you should definitely make a mixtape for your composer, and the composer should make a mixtape for you of things you like. Even though you don't know what kind of movie you're going to make, just to build that common language that you're talking about is so important. And even if you just say, like, I don't know what we're making, but, I remember one time I was doing the 48, and I said, I don't know what we're making, but I think I want it to sound like mindless self-indulgence. I've just made a decision that that's what I want. I want beats, and I want that kind of sound. And so I tried to find a composer who could make that kind of stuff, who knew about Nintendo Game Boys and recording sounds out of that and could sort of use that. I think you go in and you have to make some decisions in advance by the team that you choose, But then I think, if that composer and you have a conversation Saturday morning for 5 minutes to just say, this is what I hear, of the composer, because that's exactly what you're saying. It's just everything is so sped up that means if they aren't getting a cut until noon on Sunday, which is still pretty good actually for the 48. That's good.
If you get something by noon.
Then they're gonna really be against the wall. But I always say that that YouTube cut is gonna be lit. So I think you have to do the best thing you can with the time that you have, and then know that. But themes for a good composer, if they feed you those themes, they might be able to cut while you're editing. You might be able to cut to the themes and then feed them back, and they do a little zhuzh. And then after Sunday, they might do a revised version for YouTube. But that's what I see sometimes with the 48.
Well,
That
themes
sounds
are everything. I mean, like if I'm looking at a composer's work in terms of whether they're right for a project, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for how they have a theme, how they utilize that theme, how they bring that theme back, how they change it slightly as the character develops, those sort of things, how the story progresses, that theme will progress as well. That's what I'm looking for the most part. I know composers know how to compose. I know they know how to make music. It's can they really get the emotional standpoint of the film and utilizing that theme to do that.
So Saturday is a big time for theme writing.
Well, and I think I think one other thing is, there's this idea with the 48, but on big budget projects, it's not like that. It is. It's always like that. We did this last season, Shawn and I did all the ADR for Mayor of Kingstown. And we couldn't believe it. They were shooting, and we were doing ADR on that episode within 2 days, or 3 days of it shooting, because they were releasing the episodes about 2 episodes after what they were shooting. So you're talking about a major TV series that is turning episodes in a week.
Yeah, editing as they shoot.
Right. And so you realize like that idea of the 48, the only way they're doing that is if the composer is in pre-production and the audio team is in pre-production and there is a real plan. That putting out a show on that level that quickly, the things you're doing in the 48 apply across the board. This idea that we have unlimited time to do everything. I don't think we've ever had a project where someone has gone, take all the time you need. So, yeah.
Let's open it up to the audience. I just want to have a few questions, and then I want to break. But yes, Dan.
So when you're composing and you have your final project and you're ready to send the stems out, how much actual mixing and processing do you do on those stems before you send it out?
That's a great question. I've worked in a few different arenas. Since we were just talking about TV and how insane those schedules are, I typically, let's take Prodigal Son, for instance. There was a 42-minute episode. There's anywhere between 30 and 35 minutes of score that had to be written for each episode with about a 7-day turnaround. So in that case, I am definitely mixing as I write. And a lot of that show was in the box, as we say, meaning it was all written in the computer, produced in the computer, and I actually used, if you wanted some technical details here, I sequence in Logic, and I record everything into Pro Tools. And what that does for me is I am mixing as I'm writing, or when I'm done with the cue, I'll do a mix pass, and then I commit it to audio and Pro Tools so that by the end of writing that episode, everything is in place in Pro Tools, ready to send. If I have the luxury of recording, then my timeline gets shifted. Usually, so we can take the same example here. Let's say I am recording an episode of television. I'm never going to record all 30 to 35 minutes. I'm going to pick and choose what I'm going to record. I start writing those so I can get them off to the orchestrator. Then I finish the stuff that's, again, in the box. Then there's the recording session, and then a music mixer does come in at that point. And after it's been recorded, they mix it, and that gets added to the rest of my Pro Tools session that gets delivered. On a feature film, same kind of deal, where it would depend on budget. Do they have a budget to hire a music mixer? Then I would adapt writing in that way to where I'm set up to kind of stem things out to send to a mixer who does their thing before it gets delivered. If not, like 3 weeks to do a 60-minute score, there's no mixer involved there in that case. So that was done in that same style where things were being mixed as they were being written and committed to audio. Mm-hmm.
Next question. Yes.
How do you make the transition, or what recommendations do you have from musician/band member to composer?
How do you make that switch from musician to, or from band member to composer?
Like
Yeah.
front end to what recommendations?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I'm a big proponent of practice. So I would, and it could be anything. You take scenes off the internet. There's plenty out there that you can get a hold of that are from major projects, but they've had the music stripped out of them, or you can find something that's even public domain and practice scoring them. You can kind of work on your own portfolio that way, and then start meeting filmmakers like here. Get to events like this, introduce yourself, go to film festivals, talk to filmmakers. They're the ones who are actually going to hire you, and just try to pitch yourself, and one thing leads to the next, and you just kind of got to build it that way.
Also, and we do this this is true in all of our fields and in music, the biggest thing you can do is listen. Go watch as many films as you can with phenomenal composers and really pay attention to what the score is doing. Try not to focus on, what's obvious on the screen. Listen to the subtleties of the score. Obviously, the big ones. Every composer needs to memorize everything John Williams, Hans Zimmer, the big ones. We all know. But, there are so many other composers doing really cutting edge stuff right now. And listening. And the other thing is you can buy a lot of their scores and see what they're actually doing. That's a big thing. That's true in all of music. The best thing to do to learn how to, write it and play it is to listen to other people doing it. So it's really easy in film.
Yeah.
It's a multi-part question. So for composers who have been in the independent film scene for a while, how can a composer and a sound engineer get to that next level of actually getting paid gigs from TV series and bigger films in Hollywood? Do you actually have to go to LA to network, or can you do it from Pittsburgh, and if so, how?
How do you make that switch to the next move? I'm just saying it so that the camera can hear, because I missed yours.
That's a good question. I wish there was a formula that I could just give you. But unfortunately, the real answer to that is that next gig is usually who you know, who you've worked with, and how do you get a gig if you haven't worked with that person before? That's how you build a network. So if you get that one thing, that independent film, then I would encourage you to do everything you can to know as many people on that project as you possibly can. Get in the room with them. If there's a wrap party, make sure you're there. If there's a screening, make sure you're there. Because if you build a relationship with them, and they're the easiest people to build a relationship with. You were in the trenches with them. You've shared an experience. You don't know where they're going next. So, those are the relationships that you need to build and keep and stay in touch with them and make sure they know what you're doing at any given point in time. And and then things just kind of go from there.
What do you make of like doing a secondary cut of your own work, where you strip away some of the other things so that you just hear the composing over top?
For demo purposes?
Yeah, what's your demo like? How do you do that?
Certainly, if I'm demoing something that I've done before, or I've been teaching quite a bit over the last few years, and even in the teaching realm, I definitely do my own mix. Sorry to mixers on, but yeah, I do my own mix where the music is louder than it would be on the project, but I don't get rid of the other stuff because, as Shawn was talking about, if you're up for a gig, it's not how great your music sounds, it's how great does it work with the picture. And if they're not getting the dialogue and the sound effects with it, then they're not getting that full picture about what you actually do and the sensibilities that you have. But on the other hand, it is important for them to hear your music, so you don't want to bury it. So,
I'll go back to your question there too. It's just keep working. You may get onto something fairly big, but it's that next job. It may not be bigger. It may be a lot smaller. But the key is just keep working.
Do you think you have to go to LA to make those?
None of us want to answer
Right.
that question.
Yeah, it's more of what do you really want to do? If you want to work on big Hollywood feature films, yeah, you're going to have to at least work there for a period of time. That's the only way to meet the people that are really doing that type of work. I get into that a lot in terms of the projects I work on because the director or the producer live in the area, which is close enough to me to travel to. Because that's where they're going to want to work. They're going to want to work where they live. They're not going to want to travel to work on stuff. They're in charge, so they get to pick where that is. So if you want to work on independent films, you can go to a lot of other, cities. Pittsburgh is a decent independent film, but like Toronto, Vancouver, there's a lot of other cities that are up and coming in the independent market where the people just can't afford to work in LA. But a lot of those filmmakers did the same thing. They went to LA. Like the producer I work with here in the city, he lived in LA for many years, worked as a producer, decided he wanted to come back home. Now he works here. But he went there, he knew what he wanted to do. His plan always was to move back here. But he knew he needed to be there long enough to learn that process and to learn it from the people that were doing it.
So I'm gonna fight you on this. I think that you have to find opportunities to meet people who are doing great work, and the only thing they're missing is you. So I'll say specifically Pittsburgh Shorts, Three Rivers Film Festival. Pittsburgh Shorts, they want to be an Academy qualifying festival, and they totally will keep track of the number of shorts that are up for an Academy Award that played at Pittsburgh Shorts. They're willing to show local work, but they really want to show the best work of the world and bring it to Pittsburgh. So you need to be at those screenings, and you need to go up and introduce yourself to those filmmakers afterwards. And they have a symposium where it's like a teaching symposium that lasts a weekend. I always give away free tickets at the 48, and we'll have free tickets to give away this fall to that symposium. It's not very much money, but you need to make sure you're there. You need to make sure you're introducing yourself to those people. And, it's sort of a swarthy thing or maybe a smarmy thing, but I think, it's about giving you their card and say, your movie was really great, except you didn't have me.
So I'm going to try to bridge the two. That's a big question. I mean, LA and for music, New York and Nashville and everything. And I'm somewhere in between. I think it is all about your network. I think it is assumed that you can do the thing. If you can't do the thing, you're just out of the game. Don't worry about it. But if you can do the thing, it is about your network. And the difference between Pittsburgh and LA, and I think this is kind of gets to the middle of it, I genuinely think the work that can come out of Pittsburgh is as good as what can come out of LA. I think the amount of that work is significantly smaller. So that network, you have to be much more focused on what that network is. In LA, if you go to Pittsburgh, I mean, Nathaniel, we've been friends for a while now, and his compositions are amazing. There's another LA scorer that just moved back to Pittsburgh and is splitting his time, and he's blowing up right now, blowing up, and he's in Pittsburgh. The difference is there are going to be 4 or 5 of those people in Pittsburgh. In LA, there are going to be 200 of those people. So I don't like when people, and I think PJ's getting to this too, I don't like when people say, oh, Pittsburgh's not that market. The quality here it's great. You just have to be really, really smart about how you build that network. When we work on projects that, Michael Bay is not coming to Pittsburgh to mix his next film. That's not going to happen. But we've worked with a lot of those directors and everything, and we are told constantly, man, you're our new studio for doing this. This was as smooth as it was anywhere we've worked. The difference is there's going to be a couple places in Pittsburgh that can do that. There are 20 places in LA that can do that. That to me is the difference. It's not the quality, it's the amount. And the best thing going back to your question that Nathaniel answered, in that network, the best thing you can do is what you're doing right now. The fact that you came out tonight, not only can you, after this, go up and talk to them. Talk to us, because and so that will increase your network. But the other thing is, I don't know, there are 75, 100 people in this room who, some people in this room are going to rise up, and they're going to get that break on a bigger film or with a higher budget and something like that. And we all fundamentally believe in rising up together. So, Shawn and I, that's why we connected, because we weren't people that were like, hey, I'm going to build my reputation off this, and then immediately when I can, I'm going to bolt. It's no, we're going to take those people up with us. That's why Nathaniel and I got along so well so early on. And that exists here, and that is in this room right now. So the best thing you can be doing is talking to everybody in this room, doing the 48, because you never know who you're going to meet on one of those projects. And then that person, through happenstance, gets a huge break and goes, you know what? You told me when you got on The Flash, it was because of someone you met at the USC workshop, right?
That was through Blake. I will say I did a short film called Shakespeare High that got into Tribeca one year, and I got that because my wife was a teacher at the time, and the theater teacher at her school was making this film, and it was just through this weird. We were having lunch, I think, and he was like, "Oh, you write music for movies? Well, I'm making this movie," and then that became a thing. Not by me looking at all, but just a sheer luck. I will say too, when you talk about next level, I don't know, you could be referring to budget or quality or whatever. But if you are in the independent arena, whether you're in Los Angeles or here, I don't know that there's much of a difference in terms of success, potential success. You don't know what's going to bomb. You don't know what's going to be great, and hit the festival circuit and get a lot of buzz, and the next thing you know, It's like, oh, I want the composer who did that on my film. So I like that advice. Just keep doing what you're doing.
All right, so we should move on to our next phase. So please give it up for these amazing folks. They do have a lot more that they want to tell you, and I want to give them an opportunity to do it. If is now a good time, let's open the door and get people flowing, because
Yeah, sure.
it's 6:50, and I'm hoping around 7:40 to do some 60-second pitches.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe we it's a big building. Just to explain to everybody if you want to. So we're going to open up that door right there. That kind of goes to the other wing of the building, which is our main studios. There are going to be 3 doors in there. You will see we have it listed on the door what each room is. Back there, in the far back of the room, is one of our staff, Ben. Ben, can you raise your hand? Everybody can say hi to Ben.
Hi, Ben.
So Ben is a really, really talented audio engineer, but also a talented film composer with a fair amount of experience at this point. He's going to be in our Studio B, showing some of his work and talking about his story and his journey, so feel free to go talk to him. Nathaniel and I are going to be in our Studio A's control room, answering any questions. We're friends, so if you don't show up, it's fine. We'll just talk to each other. And then Shawn is going to be kind of moving around. And then in our Studio A live room, we're going to have a bunch of composers, all at different parts of their journey. They are set up at tables with demo reels and headphones. Please go up, ask them, let me hear your demo reel. They'll play it for you. Talk to them about what you like and what you're doing. And that's just going to be a really good networking way to meet new composers. So,
And if you are a composer that's here, but you're not set up in that room yet, we can get you over there and set up. So if you have something that you want people to listen to, there's room. We'll find a spot for you over there too. All right. Thank you all so much. Let's take a break. Get a drink from Poor Johnny's. Get a crazy egg roll from Demonstration. Get something to eat. Let's go to the next one.